2, 1, and liftoff. Starliner is headed back to space on the shoulders of Atlas, powered by a workforce dedicated to its success.
Aloha and e komamai. Welcome to the 24th AMOS Conference presented by Maui Economic Development Board. Please welcome President and CEO Leslie Wilkins to the stage.
Aloha and welcome to the 24th Annual AMOS Technical Conference. We are delighted to see so many friends that have been with us over the years, and also pleased to welcome so many new attendees, first-timers this year. The wildfires that devastated our beautiful island just 6 weeks ago showed the world the heart of Maui and our community. We thank you for being here and showing your support. We are very grateful. And it is in response to you, the calls that you made, how you could help, how you could be generous supporters, that MEDB established the AMOS for Maui Fire Recovery Fund to collect donations. Again, our heartfelt gratitude for your outpouring of aloha. On that solemn note, we invite our dear friend, Kahu Alika, who has been with us to start this conference for so many years, to offer a customary Hawaiian invocation to set the tone for this week's discussions. Kahu?
I was told that I have 7 minutes, but Leslie gave up some of her time. I can't help myself. Anyway. O honau nei kahala, me ka lehua, e hi e hala lehua, o ia nā kanohe. O huo ka uno ia, e ano i nei, e ali a nei, ho e o ka hiki mai. Hiki mai no o ko. A hiki puno me ke aloha, aloha aloha Velena me ke aloha ia o ko, ike ia kakahiaka. Aloha and good morning to all of you. Aloha. Mahalo. If you are kama'aina, born and raised here in Hawaii, or malihini, someone who has moved to Maui and grown up here, or someone who has recently become a resident, or if you are a newcomer visiting our island for the first time, welcome to the 24th Advanced Maui Optical and Space Surveillance Technologies Conference. While AMOS is a helpful acronym that frees us from having to say Advanced Maui Optical and Space Surveillance Technologies Conference whenever we find ourselves having to refer to our gathering here in Wailea, I am reminded of the question, so what's in an acronym or a name? Long before I thought of optical and space surveillance technologies, the Amos I know came through my theological studies. Amos was a Judean prophet from the village of Tekoa. He was active in the northern kingdom of Israel during the reign of Jeroboam II in the 7th century. His message was one of doom. He directs his condemnation primarily against the northern kingdom. He pronounces judgment on the rich for self-indulgence and oppression of the poor, on those who pervert justice. 16 centuries have come and gone. It seems not much has changed. One wonders what Amos might say to us in our own day and time of what is happening in many places around the world, where the chasm between the rich and poor widens with each passing day. In the aftermath of the catastrophic wildfire in Lahaina, many of you have found yourselves overwhelmed by misinformation and disinformation, which has proliferated on social media. There was even a reference in one posting that indicated Amos, not the prophet, but this conference, was involved in a conspiracy regarding the use of a space laser that caused the fire. It would be easy for us to be titillated by such disinformation. I'm not going to ask you to bow your heads or close your eyes. I want to offer a prayer of lament for our island, Maui. Instead, I invite you to listen with your ears and with your hearts to the words I share with you this morning. Our prayer is not a prayer of praise, but a prayer of complaint. We cry out in anguish over the pain and suffering of so many that is mirrored in the words of the psalmist who wrote, "How long, O Lord, must we suffer in sorrow? Will you forget us? How long will you hide your face from us?" Our prayer is an expression of anger toward God. Our prayer is about a sense of abandonment, but more than anything, it is an expression of our deep, deep kaumaha, the Hawaiians would say, our profound grief. So we do not piously acquiesce to unbearable pain and sorrow. We do not rush to offer words of reassurance of God's omnipotence. Instead, we hold fast to one another through these days and through the many days that are yet to come. We understand and we remind ourselves that we are pilina. We are bound to one another through our relationships and the connections we share with one another. Pilina are the multitude of watermen and women who paddled out into the waters surrounding our islands to express their aloha and love for Maui. Pilina are the musicians throughout Hawaii who have shared their music in benefit concerts to provide financial support for the work that lay ahead. Pilina are the na kumuhula and haumana, the teachers and students of hula who have been part of those concerts. Pilina are students who have joined others as volunteers distributing water and other supplies to those in need. Pilina are the first responders who are neighbor and family to us. Pilina are those in banking who have made the decision to place a moratorium on mortgage payments for homeowners whose homes no longer exist. Pilina is the decision made by the University of Hawaii to grant full scholarships to members of the senior class of Lahaina Luna High School. Pilina does not answer the question of who is responsible for the fire or when and how it started. Pilina is about what our response has been and will be as the community of relationships bound to one another, whether you're kama'aina or malihini. Pilima, first and foremost, this morning is about sharing our kaumaha, our grief with one another. Some look upon a prayer of lament as a song for those who have died, that they are meant to aid one's soul on its journey from this world to the realm beyond, a journey to cross over into that place where God abides. Our prayer is that, but it is much, much more. It is not only for the people who died or for those who were injured. Our prayer is for the air, the ocean, the trees and plants the creatures of the land, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea. In this moment, in this time and place, our grieving is our prayer of lament. Amama. The prayer is finished. So, every year we have to watch these electronic devices. I try to get the first row, but they're too far back. So if you've been here before, Lauki is a test. Half of you have been here before. What does it do? It keeps you safe in your coming and going. The pikai, or the water from the ocean, or in this case, it's from Wailuku, since I live on that side of the island, is a symbol to clear the way in your time together. So the blessing is simple. He po mai ka ine au I ke ia ahahalavai o AMOS 2023, I loko ka inoa o ke akua, o Nalani a me kahunua. We offer a blessing for your time together in the name of the one who created the heavens and the earth. Aloha e, aloha e, aloha e. Aloha.
Thank you so much. It's just beautiful. Thank you so much, Kahu. We appreciate the message of aloha and responsibility that you have continued to share with this group through the years to set the tone for our conference proceedings the rest of the week. Mahalo. So now that we have acknowledged our sense of place, let's see who has joined us. Let's see who is here. As we look ahead to a productive week of strategic and exploratory discussions in space domain awareness, we are encouraged by the continued evolution of our audience. There are 1,076 attendees who are joining us here in person on Maui, and an additional 239 are participating virtually, clearly our largest conference ever. We welcome an international presence at AMOS with participation from 25 countries, including our neighbors in the Indo-Pacific region, as well as Europe and South America. There are a number of viewing options for times when the ballroom is at capacity. An overflow room is available downstairs on Wednesday this morning and Thursday morning. The conference mobile app and virtual platform provide flexibility to join us from where it is most convenient for you, and is your link to ask presenters questions throughout the program. In response to the record number of technical submissions received this year, the virtual poster category is an inclusive opportunity with an addition of over 100 virtual posters. Bringing further recognition to our poster presenters, we continue the lightning pitches during the poster sessions today and tomorrow. 4 prizes have been awarded to in-person poster presenters with a golden ticket award, which guarantees an oral presentation slot for AMOS 2024. Stop by the poster and exhibit hall to see who the winners are. We are absolutely excited that Women and Allies in SDA returns tonight in its 2nd year, celebrating diversity within the space industry. Dr. Janet Wolfson, Director of Science, Technology, and Engineering, Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Space Acquisition and Integration, will share brief remarks at an evening of networking, desserts, and dancing under the stars. Tickets are limited, so see our hospitality desk for details. Next, we recognize the companies, organizations, and individuals who have made the 24th AMOS conference possible. With their support, we have been able to continue to develop our hybrid infrastructure and expand our global reach. We have seen a tremendous increase in new companies placing value on both exhibiting and branding at AMOS, as evident and the volume of Malama supporters. Please look at the screen behind me to see the very generous support of the companies that make this possible. Continuing on at the Kupa'a level, mahalo to Astroscale US, Deloitte Consulting, Space Map, and Spider Oak. At the Lokahi level, we thank Ball Aerospace, EOS Solutions, General Atomics Electromagnetic Systems, Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, LSAS Tech, Peraton, Secure World Foundation, Slingshot Aerospace, and Space Foundation. And at the Laulima level, Anduril, Exoanalytic Solutions, Kratos, Leo Labs, North Star Earth and Space, LinQuest, RTX, and SpaceNav. At the Kakua level, our deepest appreciation to Comstock, KBR, L3 Harris, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and SAIC. And finally, at the Po'okela level, mahalo to the Boeing Company for their continued partnership as our top sponsor. We truly appreciate the support Boeing provides as a long-standing pillar in Maui's technical community. With their ongoing investment in the local STEM workforce and leading the charge of the next generation of space leaders as one of the top sponsors for our EMER-GEN program. You can meet our exhibitors in the exhibit venue, online view sponsors, and don't forget the digital swag bag for their latest offerings. Space Day. Get ready for the noise. On Friday, 150 middle school students and their STEM educators from Maui and Molokai will convene in the exhibit hall for hands-on learning and to meet astronaut Scott Scuba Altman. Thank you, astronaut Altman. Several AMOS sponsors have also elected to help us further Hawaii's STEM education programs by contributing to Maui Economic Development Board's Kealahou Fund or by joining us as a member. You can visit medbpathways.org to learn more. Mahalo for helping us create engaging experiences and opportunities for our island's youth. EMER-GEN. This is our 6th annual EMER-GEN program. We focus on young professionals and students passionate about space, providing them professional development, unparalleled mentorship, and networking. It is a joint initiative of AMOS and the Space Generation Advisory Council. This year's EMER-GEN welcomed 40 young space professionals in the cohort. 14 of them had Hawaii ties and call Hawaii home for a 2-day experience complemented by a series of webinars. Members of the cohort will present a program outcome here on Friday afternoon on the main stage. Continuing with our thank yous, we recognize the 223 presenters and co-authors who have joined us in person and online to share their expertise with you. We also thank our session chairs for their leadership and stewardship of the conference's technical credibility. It was a very difficult job this year with record numbers of abstracts submitted. Thank you. With the unfailing guidance and experience, we thank our conference technical chairs who are seated right down here, Paul Kervin and Darren Nishimoto, who helped us navigate our most successful call for papers yet. Would you please stand and be recognized? Very important partners of the AMOS conference and Maui's innovation sector are the U.S. Space Force and Air Force Research Laboratory. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Wagenbach, would you please join and stand up so we can acknowledge your leadership? Thank you so much. And finally, we thank the Wailea Beach Resort Marriott for their gracious hospitality for 22 of our 24 years presenting this conference. They have adapted to our changing needs and recognized that by hosting this AMOS conference, they are directly supporting an initiative that impacts Maui's economy and the livelihood of our community. Thank you to this hotel for welcoming over 1,000 guests. Each year, we ask for your feedback as we shape the next conference. Printed forms are in the conference bag and available digitally in the mobile app and on the virtual platform. We are already planning for the 25th AMOS conference. That planning begins literally on Saturday. It will be our 25th anniversary. You won't want to miss it. And before I close and bring our next presenter to the stage, there's a heartfelt mahalo that I would like to make. I have the privilege of working alongside some of the most amazingly dedicated, committed professional women. I feel they are the best conference presenting team in the business, led by Sandy Ryan, our director, Annette Lynch, Leilani Ventura, and a new person joining us here, Jessica Melton. But you know, once you're part of the MEDB family, we don't let you go easily. So Amber Hardwick has come back to help with the presentations this week. Thank you, Amber. Let's give them a heartfelt round of applause. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Victoria Sampson. She is the Washington Office Director of Secure World Foundation. We are grateful for our continued partnership with Secure World, and we look forward to 3 days of preeminent keynotes and SSA policy panels. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for being here. And she has a special introduction.
Good morning, everyone. As Leslie said, my name is Victoria Sampson. I'm with the Secure World Foundation. It is truly my honor to introduce our keynote speaker to kick off today's events, who is General B. Chase Saltzman, the Chief of Space Operations for the United States Space Force. As Chief, he serves as the Senior Uniformed Space Force Officer, responsible for all organic and assigned space forces serving the United States and overseas. As members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of Space Operations and the other service chiefs function as military advisors to the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council, and President. General Saltzman is a graduate of Boston University and was commissioned in 1991. He has operational experience with missile and space systems as a Minuteman III launch officer, and as a satellite operator for the National Reconnaissance Office. He has also served as the first Chief of Combat Plans and later as Chief of Combat Operations. General Saltzman has commanded at the squadron, group, and wing levels. Before serving in his current assignment, General Saltzman was a Deputy Chief of Space Operations for Operations Cyber and Nuclear, the U.S. Space Force, Pentagon, Arlington. So with that, please join me in welcoming General Saltzman to the podium. Thank you very much.
Keep the applause going while I walk over there.
Good job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right there.
Thank you. Aloha. Aloha. This is awesome. This is my first AMOS. Can you believe it? All this way, and there's only one BU graduate. Listen, before I begin today, I'd like to express sincere appreciation, support for the brave people of Maui as they continue to grapple with the aftermath of the devastating wildfires. I know this has been a challenging time for everyone, but I'm filled with the admiration for the collective strength and resilience of the people of Maui. The Space Force is proud to be a part of the Maui community, and we are here to support the community any way we can. I was able to meet with some of the members of the informal Maui Tech Hui yesterday, which consists of the 15th Space Surveillance Squadron, a number of industrial partners, as well as some commercial startups who deployed Starlink terminals to the west side. The Starlink systems that were placed at key spots, like Lahaina, were a big help for those who were sheltering in place but did not have access to power or communications. The terminals not only served their designated purposes, but they also helped first responders with communication support and thereby helped nearby residents by providing them with charging stations, even refrigerator and freezer capability off the truck-mounted mobile terminals. This was quite an impressive thing. I got to see some pictures yesterday. It was amazing. And I speak on behalf of the entire Space Force when I say, thanks to all for pitching in to help the Maui community during this difficult time. I'm also pleased we were able to work with the Maui community to ensure that this conference did not interfere with local recovery efforts. And I encourage everyone who attends this week to take advantage of or share stories from volunteer work in support of the people of Lahaina. The AMOS conference is one of the premier conferences on space domain awareness. And being able to host here strengthens our connections to the local communities and enables our nation's ability to improve our space domain awareness efforts. Our 15th Space Surveillance Squadron is unique within the Space Force. It directly fuses space domain awareness operations with capabilities and development. The 15th is a component of Space Delta II, but it also operates experimental research and development systems under Air Force Research Lab. The site atop Haleakala was built in the 1960s as an electro-optical observation platform for missile tests, and it has evolved into a world-class observatory supporting missions in space control, space sustainability, and other related fields. In addition to being called the Neighborhood Watch of Space, the 15th Space Surveillance Squadron is committed to being good neighbors to the people of Maui. As you may have heard, the Secretary of the Air Force has been talking about optimizing the department for the return of great power competition. The Space Force is committed to this effort, and we remain closely aligned with our sister service and the Secretariat. Under Secretary Kendall's leadership, and with strong partners in the Air Force and other services, we've done a lot in a very short time. For example, the Space Development Agency, which stood up in just 2019, launched their second set of Tranche 0 satellites, a technology demonstrator designed to build resilience for the future hybrid space architecture. This proliferated constellation's purpose is to deliver tactical and sensor data to address the advanced threats like hypersonic missiles. A government organization, 4 years old, launching and operating 23 satellites soon after stand-up. This is a feat unheard of just a decade ago. We've also stood up the Department of Defense's first and only ex-GEO and cislunar space domain awareness missions. Space Delta II, along with the 15th and 19th Space Surveillance Squadrons, did this by developing relationships with industry and academia, leveraging commercial tools and capabilities, building training for operators, identifying capability needs for both command and control and sensors, and developing tactics, techniques, and procedures to support this new mission area. But these wins are not enough if we're going to outpace our competitors. Today's space domain is far different from the one I started operating back in 1998 with the NRO. We live in a considerably more dynamic and dangerous security environment around the world. It impacts all domains, including space. For one, there's just a lot more satellites up there now. And this historic growth of activity in the space domain was the genesis of the Space Force, a military service specifically focused on addressing the challenges and opportunities in the domain. And we were created for this new space era, an era increasingly driven by great power competition. We have a real-time example of this competition playing out today, as the conflict in Ukraine has shown us space is critical to modern warfare. In Ukraine, space has played a vital role in communications, precision navigation and timing, missile warning, C4ISR to allies and our partners alike. And commercial augmentation has proven its value during this conflict. It's unclassified, promotes shareability, and it supplements classified data that we're providing to allies, partners, even industry. Commercial augmentation enables more distributed mission assets for our allies and partners. And those commercial capabilities will only become more important as we go forward, particularly as we look to greater resilience inherent in proliferated, disaggregated, and hybrid constellations. Along the same lines, we need to look at our vulnerabilities in all three segments of space operations: the on-orbit systems, the links, comm networks, and the ground stations. We cannot afford any of these segments to be exploitable vulnerabilities to our space mission. Space is far too critical to have a single point of failure anywhere. But protecting hardware and the infrastructure is not enough. We need to collectively maximize our efficiency and effectiveness given the unique requirements of the space domain in the midst of great power competition. So we have been taking a long, hard look at our mission and how we talk about it. In fact, we've recently updated our mission statement to better describe who we are and what we do. Secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space. It clearly reflects our purpose and identity as guardians. This new mission statement is the first step in creating what I call a foundational service framework, defining the why of the Space Force. It helps clarify what the Department of Defense tasks us to do each and every day. In the military sense, our task of securing the space domain is a reflection of the Space Force's charge to prepare ourselves to control the space domain with force if necessary, as part of the joint force, while also protecting the security and prosperity our nation derives from space. And since so many joint force operations depend on space capabilities and protection from space-enabled attacks, our guardians are an integral part of the joint team. Our mission statement also touches on the core functions of the Space Force. Core functions are the what a service does. Every military service, regardless of domain, must field forces capable of three core activities: access to the domain, control of the domain, and exploitation of the domain in order to ensure the security and sustainability of the domain, not just for the U.S., but for all of our allies and partners. First, a service must be able to control its domain in order to enable the other two functions. For the Space Force, space superiority is this first core function, and it is the N aspect of the mission statement. It is the ability to contest, and when necessary, control the domain at a time and place of our choosing. These activities protect the joint force and nation from space and counter-space threats. In today's congested and contested environment, control of the domain is an operational imperative. As a service, we must be able to control our domain, just like in the air superiority, or on the sea through maritime control, and land dominance achieved by the Army. Now, space superiority. Only once a service has control of its domain can it then perform its other missions. Control is a prerequisite, because if we cannot control our domain, our ability to utilize it is severely limited. This leads us to our second core function, global mission operations, or the from space defined in the mission statement. This is how the Space Force, as a military service, utilizes the domain, with operations that enable the joint force to integrate the joint functions across all domains on a global scale. That last piece is particularly important, because only the U.S. Space Force can provide the truly worldwide capabilities our forces require as they defend U.S. and allied interests across the planet. The joint force needs global communications. It needs global indications and warning. It needs global precision. The Space Force gives them that day in and day out. And Guardians secure the nation's interests to space by assuring we have ability to launch satellites into orbit and then connect to them, control them from a ground control network. We refer to this as access to space, and it's the third and final core function. For the Space Force, that access to the space domain takes the form of two characteristics: launch capabilities and the satellite control network. The network that establishes the radio frequency links to the satellites in order to command, download mission data, or transfer information between satellites. Taken together, the mission statement and our core functions provide our Guardians with shared purpose, a common understanding of our overall strategy. It allows us, as a service, to ensure the safety and security of the domain for all who wish to use it. Now, the situation in Ukraine has not just demonstrated the criticality of space, the changing character of warfare, but the importance of timely coordination with allies, with alliances that share a common set of standards. So as we continue to build and prepare prepare for future competition in space, there is no question that the viability of our efforts rests on our ability to build a coalition to uphold and strengthen a rules-based international order for space. To that end, we still have much to do to normalize space operations. Success in the space domain is the ultimate team sport, and our international partnerships are critical to ensuring that success. In particular, success in the space domain also requires comprehensive and actionable space domain awareness. You guys tracking this? This is kind of a big deal here, right? Let me just say it again, because I want to make sure we're emphasizing the right points here. Success in the space domain requires comprehensive and actionable space domain awareness. We must understand what's happening in space to ensure safe operations, while simultaneously monitoring for behaviors that are irresponsible, even hostile. Because any conflict in space has global ramifications, space domain awareness must be a collective effort. A shared understanding of the domain enables the coalition to have actionable, cooperative decision-making. It helps promote responsible behaviors and enables appropriate responses that avoid unnecessary escalation when confronted with malign, irresponsible, even dangerous actions. I firmly believe that we must normalize how we collectively operate in this domain by building a coalition space domain awareness framework. We need to continue the shared strength of interoperability we see in other domains. We need globally distributed sensors, and we need our allies and industry partners collecting, securing, and sharing data with each other. This call to action requires work such as common data standards, strong cybersecurity principles, lowered classifications, and an inherent belief in the security and sustainability of the space domain for future generations. However, we must not neglect that all space users will be in the combat zone during a conflict that extends into space. You cannot separate civilian, commercial, military assets in this domain. You cannot stop satellites from passing overhead through active conflict zones on the Earth. You have civilian, commercial, military assets sharing orbits, operating in close proximity. We all share the risk if war comes to space. I believe there are ways to mitigate this risk. As we've learned before, mutual understanding, interoperable equipment, common communications, network infrastructure, these are the building blocks of success. If we ignore these lessons, space assets could be disconnected from the greater effort, and operational effectiveness would suffer as a result. To implement these lessons, we must collectively build tactics, techniques, procedures, train like we plan to fight, and operate together, just like we do in every domain. The bottom line is that cooperation is absolutely essential. Successfully achieving a safe, stable, secure, and sustainable domain will rest on our ability to collectively work together and normalize space operations in the same vein as our agreements in the air, land, and sea domains. To not do so will invite crippling attacks on space infrastructure that underpins most of our terrestrial force designs now. And that cooperation extends across government agencies as well. As we look to the future of our increasingly congested space domain, we are working very closely with the Department of Commerce to ensure our compliance with Space Policy Directive 3. The White House issued this directive to allow the Space Force to focus on maintaining access to and freedom of action in space, with the Department of Commerce being responsible for the publicly releasable portion of the DoD catalog and for administering an open architecture data repository. And since then, we've been working closely to develop a new approach to space traffic management, one that addresses current and future operational risks. This new approach must set priorities for space situational awareness, encourage the growth of our commercial space sector. We continue to work together to establish an effective space traffic management architecture, all while promoting shared space safety standards and best practices across the international community. The Commerce Department has established a Commercial Space Coordination Committee and an Office of Space Commerce. Both are already meeting with industry officials to discuss next steps in crafting space traffic coordination system, including satellite operators, all with the goal of encouraging better sharing of spacecraft location data with both government and other commercial operators. Of note, the Office of Space Commerce received $70 million for FY 2023, with the majority of that funding going into the Space Situational Awareness System, that Commerce was tasked to develop. And they're making good progress, fielding the initial operational capability of the system, which they have rebranded as TRACS, the Traffic Coordination System for Space. Earlier this year, the Office of Space Commerce and DoD wrapped up a 2-month pilot project that provided valuable insights into the system, insights that have been incorporated into the planning for TRACS going forward. In some ways, we have much to do. We've accomplished much, but we still have much to do. Now, with that said, it's worth noting that Delta II's mission and vision will change very little with space traffic management officially transitioning to the Department of Commerce. We'll keep the lines of communication open as this process continues to evolve. In closing, I'd like to offer that the conflict in Ukraine has made it clear. Access to and the use of space is fundamental to modern warfare. Our adversaries are constantly looking for ways to negate our advantage in space. It is also clear that technology is a force enabler that must be supported by integrating training and coalition operations. Historically, space has been an area of unilateral action. This must change. We need to work together as responsible actors to protect and defend activities that undermine the safety and security of space. We need to improve cooperation, coordination, and opportunities for interoperability. We need to collectively sustain freedom of action in space, optimize resources, enhance mission assurance and resilience, and ultimately deter conflict. We also need to increase our collaboration with the commercial space industry to enable new capabilities that support integrated deterrence and space domain awareness. Integration that includes data sharing, interoperability between our allies and industry partners. And this process has begun. We're already collaborating better than ever, and there's more to come. So thank you, not just for the opportunity to speak today, but for what you do, for being here as a part of this important conversation, and for your continuing support for the people of Maui and our nation. I look forward to working with you all in the challenging years ahead. Mahalo and Semper Supra. Thank you.
Saltzman. We have time, I think, for a few questions, and so the audience can submit them through the Q&A, but I will take advantage of having a microphone to ask the first couple. General, you talked about the need for commercial augmentation, and there was discussion, I believe, earlier last week about the Space Force is going to be releasing guidelines for the use of commercial satellite services. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. What prompted that? What do you hope to achieve with that? A timeline? Anything you could share, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. It's important. We know we have to have industry, commercial space, however you want to describe it. We know that they're indispensable partners. I think it's my job, it's the Space Force's job to kind of set the vision, outline the guidelines, make sure that we're all kind of operating from the same vision. Otherwise, it becomes a lot of ad hoc projects and everybody trying to sell things and work together, and it's a little messier. So I feel like guidance has to come from the top to kind of organize the effort. That's the starting point. But then as we started writing the document, and you may have seen in the press or in other places that this document, this commercial space strategy, is sitting on my desk. And that sounds so like I have a desk with this pile of papers, you know, which is true. I do have a desk with a pile of papers. But the reason it's on my desk is because as I was reading through it, I said, this is not enough. This is not enough. It can't just be a strategy with aspirational platitudes about how we're going to work together. I just don't think that's where we are today. It has to have more tangible guidance, things that we can take action on. And so I started asking some questions amongst the staff, like, what is the appropriate division between those services which commercial industry can provide and those services which have to be inherently governmental because of the nature of the effort, the nature of the consequences that come with it? And quite frankly, there's not a lot of easy answers there. It's something we just haven't really put pen to paper and figured out. What are the truly inherent governmental functions? You could say nuclear command and control. I think there's few people in here that would argue that when it comes to commanding and controlling, using communications capabilities to control our nuclear force, you rely on your military to take care of that. That's the most assured way to do it. And we do that. So what are the other things that are inherently governmental that we really need to say, this is an organic military responsibility because of how critical it is? And let's clearly define those so that then we can open up the space for other commercial services and say, well, okay, if that's true, let's focus there and let's pull in the commercial services. But we haven't defined those yet. We haven't defined all those terms. And so until we do that, I think this document becomes more aspirational than actionable. And so that's why there's a little bit of a pause here. I certainly hope to have something out to the community by the end of the year, but I want to make sure that we've done our foundational homework to make sure we've defined our terms. What's the difference between commercial services, commercial data, and commercial capabilities? What exactly is it that I want the commercial industry to do? And have I defined those terms so that I can put out clear requests for proposals, et cetera? And so that's the work that we're doing up front to make sure we get it right, but I want it to be actionable. And so when you see it, please give me the feedback. We'll make this a dynamic document. If it doesn't clarify things for you, if it doesn't make things actionable for you, then it's not doing what I intended, and I need that feedback as well. Okay? Thank you for that.
Thank you, General. Another question. You talked about the protection of satellites during conflicts. I think the one thing that everyone thinks about is the idea of Starlink being targeted by possibly Russian attackers. What is the Space Force's priority for that? Do you have is there a school of thought in terms of how to protect commercial actors in a war zone that are not actually entities or being paid for by the U.S. government? What are you thinking? What is your thinking on that?
Well, quite frankly, this is where I'm going to lean on our historical experience on all the other domains. There's no domain that's completely immune from the effects of warfare when warfare comes to the domain. There's going to be commercial entities, commercial organizations, commercial capabilities and assets that get caught up in the conflict. Space is no different than sea lanes. It's no different than civilian airliner traffic in Europe right now. And we have a long history. The U.S. has a long history of saying we're going to protect the things that we need to be successful. And so it would stand to reason that same philosophy would extend into space. And I have no reason to believe that that'll be different. Now the key will be how much capacity do you have to defend, and what are the things that you choose to defend at the highest prioritization. And that's what General Dickinson gets paid to do, is to determine those priorities at U.S. Space Command and say, hey, I can't protect everything, so here's my prioritization, here's the scheme. And while he's doing that, he's putting a demand signal on me to increase the protective capacity that I can offer to him so he can protect more and more. But that's an ongoing discussion, and I think it's consistent with the other domains.
Thank you. Questions from the audience now. There's a question about how the need to work with allies and commercial actors. However, it's been tough to make progress on. And so the question is, what do you see as successes, and what are the remaining challenges in order to be able to do that better?
My job in the acquisition side is centered around the requirements. And so in the one vein, I really like to have these conversations and say, hey, Frank Calvelli is your acquisition guy. Please go talk to him. But in the end, all he's doing is responding to requirements that are my responsibility. My responsibility to reach out to all the stakeholders, all the customers, all the users, pull those requirements in. And, I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen requirements creep. And suddenly you have this mega program that's trying to solve world hunger with the perfectly defined encyclopedia of requirements. And it becomes almost impossible for any one company, or even dozens of companies trying to work together, to really solve those requirements and put a capability in place on an operationally relevant timeline. That's my fault. That's our fault writing bad requirements. And it's not that each individual requirement is bad. It's that we have to make sure that we take these in very specific chunks, as small a requirement set as possible, and then make sure that the aggregate of those requirements works together when you deliver the final sets of products, a systems of systems approach rather than the one mega system. And so you may or may not be aware, but the Secretary of Defense has delegated to me the responsibility to be the force design architect for space systems for the entire armed forces. And this is really just saying, hey, get your act together on this requirements thing. Be able to account for all the stakeholder requirements, be able to put them together in packageable ways, smaller sets, something that can be delivered on operationally relevant timelines, and that will work together when those capabilities come back into the operational world. And so that's what we're working through. We're redefining how we do force design. The analytical work that you hear from the Space Warfighting Analysis Center is designed to make sure we have good data on what we want and why we want it, so that we can be as clear to industry as possible when we go out and ask for those things. So I'm really focusing, in short, on the requirement side of this and building a process that disaggregates the requirements and puts them together in modular, smaller packages, if you will, so that we can respond on an operationally relevant timeline.
Thank you. There's a question from the audience about what is your vision for the division of efforts between the National Reconnaissance Office and the U.S. Space Force, especially given pushes by both organizations to develop and field tactical ISR systems and also STA capabilities?
Yeah, it's a great question, but I think it's founded in our history more than it is as we look across normalizing how services contribute to the joint force. We have ISR capabilities in the national community, in the intelligence community. We have ISR capabilities in the Department of Defense. I didn't say anything about the domain, right? We know that's true for airborne. We know that's true in other areas, especially on the ground. And it's now true in space. There's so much work to be done that there are Department of Defense missions which require ISR capabilities, and there are intelligence community missions that require, obviously, space capabilities. And so we just have to kind of redefine our terms. If you're saying remote sensing from space, it used to be you were kind of talking about the National Reconnaissance Office, but now it's being diffused a little bit. It's being spread across other entities to include the Space Force and the Department of Defense. Where it really comes together is when we start to take advantage of our close relationship, our collaborative relationship, and start to work together to build products and processes like moving target indications. This is just an opportunity. This is not a challenge, it's an opportunity. The NRO is a world-class organization that knows how to put sensors on orbit better than any other organization in the world, I would contend. And we're the operators that have to take advantage of that. So we're going to collaborate as closely as we can to develop the CONOPS, to develop the training, to develop the network infrastructure that pulls data down and makes it tactically relevant at the speed of need. And we are well down that road to collaborating with the NRO. So there is room for two organizations because there is so much to do in this domain. And the key will just be talking, collaborating, communicating, and get the best out of both organizations to deliver the capabilities the warfighters need.
Thank you. General, a new targeting cell known as the 75th ISR Squadron was launched last month. And it's my understanding it's intended to be able to assess the capabilities, intent, and maneuverability of potential adversary satellites. My question is, how is this threat assessment different from the various other threat assessment capabilities within the Space Force, within the Space Command, with DoD? What new capability or what new mission area is this intended to accomplish?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a new mission area. I think it's a level of focus because these are Guardians, and the Guardians are using the Space Force equipment. They're looking at the Space Force tactics, techniques, and procedures. And so all of their assessment, all of the work they're doing is in direct support of those capabilities. So if we get an assessment from somebody else, there doesn't have to be a translation. Okay, what does this mean for the Space Force? At its inception, at the development of the initial set of analysis, that unit will be focused on what it means for the Space Force. And that level of focus is kind of what a new service gives you with regards to all of the foundational activities like intelligence that we'll get.
There's quite a few questions about data fusion between commercial SAE providers, allied SSA capabilities, and of course, U.S. government SSA sensors. What is your vision? How are you thinking about how that would work with the Space Force?
Yeah, it's an easy thing to say and it's a hard thing to do, right? Am I telling this crowd something they don't know? The types of data, bringing them together in a meaningful way, how you literally collect, store the information, the kinds of algorithms that allow the data to be accessible, searchable, discoverable, how you protect it at multiple classification levels across multiple systems. It is easy to say, hey, let's just fuse all this data together and get a perfect answer. I totally agree. I'm in. As soon as you guys come up with that, please let me know. I'm going to buy it. I promise. It's just a complicated matter. And so you layer onto that cybersecurity concerns around the globe, and you really get a multi-headed, complicated problem set. A worthy problem set to solve. We need to put our best and brightest against this because data fusion is one of the key things that's going to make us successful. You'll hear talk about joint all-domain command and control, right? You don't even have to raise your hand. Everybody's heard this, right? This is a common phrase. And what does that mean? And I've started to think about it in three big chunks. If you're going to do joint all-domain command and control, three things need to happen. You need to have sensor management. You need to know how you task the sensors to collect the kinds of data that you need, right? Then you need to be able to make decisions with that data. This is where the data fusion comes in. How do you make sense out of all that information so that a decision maker in the right time, the right space, make a coherent decision based on what they're observing from the data? And then the last piece of this is you have to do fire control. I'm in the military. We have to try to achieve an effect to negate a capability. We have to try to protect something. We have to try to deny, degrade, disrupt something. And that means we have to do fire control. So turning that data into an actionable decision by a unit that then has the data they need to prosecute a target really is the end-to-end deconstructed way of thinking about joint all-domain command and control. But the toughest piece of it is that bridge between sensor management, collection of the data, which we do, right? And turning that in, fusing that data into an operationally relevant and decisionable decision. You can make a decision based on that data. That is the real toughest part, and we got to do everything we can to make that happen. It's going to require a lot of effort, but I don't want people to think it's an uncomplicated proposition to be able to do that. These are hard.
Your time is almost done, don't worry. There's a question about interoperability.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, all right, done. Problem solved. In addition to that, interoperability is critical to a lot of the goals that you've been discussing today between the Space Force, industry, and coalition partners. So do you see the Space Force as the owners of establishing the standards for these systems and data and enforcing them? Or is the expectation that industry will be the one driving the creation of standards, working together, of course, the Space Force, and then carrying it out together?
I'm not sure the government knows enough to take the lead on it without direct collaboration from industry. And as I go around the world, and in the 9 or 10 months now that I've been in this job, I've had a chance to really talk to all of our most critical allies and partners. And this topic comes up a lot. One of the things they're worried about, especially now that there's a Space Force that's really focusing in on some of these challenges, they're worried we're going to leave them behind. They're worried we're going to move so fast that they won't be able to keep up, and that they'll start to lose ground in space domain because their data won't be relevant, or they won't be able to see things at the same time and pace that we're able to see it. They won't be able to launch capabilities on a tech refresh rate that they see us moving towards. They're worried about this. And so I don't have an easy answer because I told them I'm not slowing down, right? But I have to involve them. They have to be a part of the discussion. They have to see what the possibilities are. They have to have access to the industrial base that they have and that I have access to, so that we can keep talking about these interoperable standards. So I want to lead the discussion, but I don't want to lead the answer. Honestly, I think this is probably best a coalition of the willing that comes together from industry and government and academia, allies and partners, foreign entities. I think if we come together and collectively make these decisions, there'll be a lot faster buy-in, and it'll truly be more interoperable. So I want to help lead the discussion, but I don't want to drive the standards of interoperability from my position.
General, you talked about extending the mission past GEO out to cislunar with the idea of developing SDA capabilities out there. I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the priorities, again, looking at timeline, the role of partners, and then also possibly, is there a way in which we can architect future-proof supporting requirements in order to make sure that they're there to meet whatever SDA capabilities are determined the Space Force wants to carry out there?
So I think I heard, can we make space domain awareness awesome, and how fast can we do it? That's all right. I love it because I'm all in on that. We are going through a force design series of appraisals, mission area by mission area, and space domain awareness is going to come up very soon. And we are going to have to look at just not quite a clean sheet, because you never really get that opportunity because you have what you have to start with. But what's the fastest way to evolve the architecture that we know we're going to need? And then where do those elements come from? Some from industry, some from commercial, some from government inherent. How do we get more out of what we already have in place? Some from our allies and partners worldwide. How do we put that together so that we collectively understand what does the space domain architecture need to look like? And if we can just map that out, we call it the objective force. the objective force structure. If I can list out what that objective force structure looks like, then I think it gives us some guidance. It says, okay, these are the things that we think we do well and we want to double down on. These are the areas where we think there are some shortfalls or some opportunities that we can advance. And by designing and developing and then promoting what that objective force looks like, we think we'll get the most out of what industry and our allies and partners can bring to bear on this mission set and move quickly into what I'll say is timely, actionable space domain awareness, because that's really the goal. It's not getting any easier up there, as this crowd well knows. And so being able to go from observation to the orient and decide and act phase as fast as possible is the primary objective here.
General, we're right at time, but I wanted to know if you had a 30-second takeaway you wanted this audience to have from your remarks, what would that be?
It's pretty simple. The work you're doing is critical. Don't stop, go faster. And here's why. You'll hear me talk about things like competitive endurance, which is just a formulaic expression of how I think we'll achieve space superiority. When I learned to fly satellites, that wasn't what we were thinking about. We didn't think about combat losses in 1998 in space. We were thinking about how long can I stretch the survivability of this satellite out on orbit so that I don't have to pay for launching another one until I absolutely have to. The fewest number of satellites for as long on orbit as possible. That was the way we were thinking about it. That is no longer the case. Those become tremendously vulnerable targets, which would have an outsized consequence on the joint force. So things like proliferation, disaggregation. The industry has helped so much by working on small sat technologies, reducing the cost of launch. We're going to be able to put up a lot more satellites that create targeting problems for our adversaries. But I recognize, having been an old SPADOC-trained warrior in 1st Space Control Squadron back in the day, thank you. The more satellites you have on orbit, the more work there is to do, right? Collision avoidance, debris generated by launches, et cetera. These are going to be problems for this community that are going to get worse. But they're challenges and opportunities that we have to take advantage of. So we have to be professional experts in this business, call out what needs to be done, get the resources we need to be effective, because all of our other activities, from space superiority to global mission operations, and then maintaining our assured access to space, is going to be dependent on the effects that this crowd generates with space domain awareness. So as the saying goes, I'm counting on you, because we've got to get this right. It is truly the most foundational thing that we do for all of our mission areas is space domain awareness. So thank you for what you do, for pushing the envelope, for making the most out of the data that you're given, for finding ways to get more data, for finding ways to fuse that data and build space domain awareness on an operationally relevant timeline. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, General Saltzman.